All right, so we're just going to go through some slides here. This is just our generic like community informational. We're going to talk about kind of what Awaken does, the services we provide, how we work with survivors that are coming out of sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation. We'll talk about trafficking and what that looks like specific to national and local data. And then at the end, we'll have some questions. There's always a lot of questions involving this topic. So just feel free to keep those in mind, and we'll have a time at the end where you guys can ask all those questions. So first off, oh, there we go. Oh, all right. So what is sex trafficking? All right, so we define that as whenever a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. Those are the three main things we'll talk about a lot today. Or when the person induced to perform the sex act is under the age of 18. A commercial sex act is defined as any sex act on account of which anything of value, money, drugs, shelter, food, clothes, is given to, promised, or received directly or indirectly by any person. This is a really broad umbrella, and it's designed that way because we understand that there's value to a lot of different things, and it's not just money being exchanged for a sex act, especially when we talk about the populations that are typically targeted. It's anything of value. So it can be housing, it can be, a ride somewhere, it can be clothing. And so anytime there's an exchange for a sex act of any kind, is what we consider a commercial sex act. So the three elements to trafficking specifically are, like we said, force, fraud, and coercion. Force is exactly what it sounds like: physical assault, confinement, drugging a person to incapacitate him or her. And anytime that there's force involved, that is one of the first elements. And in order for this to be considered sex trafficking, in order for any situation to be considered that, it has to have all three. It can't have a few, it can't have just one. It's got to have force, fraud, and coercion in a court of law in order for it to be considered a sex trafficking situation. The second one is fraud. This is false promises. Really, we see this a lot with like when teens show up for modeling advertisements, and there's some type of sex trafficking that occurs later. This can be a promise of marriage or somebody getting married and then being forced into sex acts later. Fraud can come in a variety of ways, and we've seen many different examples of fraud. And then coercion, this is the hardest one, not only for us to work with survivors, but also to be able to prove in a court of law. The first two typically are a little easier to be able to pinpoint. Force, usually there's some type of physical force in a lot of ways. Fraud, there's usually like a trail that we can point back to. But coercion is that psychological mind manipulation most of the time.
In which a glass cleaner?
Yeah. So this is like threatening to hurt a loved one, intimidation, again, another threat of physical force, blackmail. We see that a lot. And so the coercion aspect, which we will talk about more in depth, is definitely one of the more difficult elements of these three things to not only prove, but also when it comes to the freedom that a survivor, the journey that they're on to experience freedom later, that's one of the hardest aspects of trauma for them to be able to work through and to find freedom in. So this is from Shared Hope International, talking about how what traffickers use from the force, fraud, and coercion. They use fear, violence, intimidation, threats to ensure compliance and then to meet the demand of their buyers. And the common age that a child enters sex trafficking is between the ages of 14 and 16. Which, as you see, it says is too young and naive to realize what's happening. And again, a lot of that happens from a fraud element, an older boyfriend promising to love them and all these different things. And so that's how traffickers are introducing these things to our young people and to our youth. We'll talk more about all the vulnerabilities that are already present and evident in a lot of these youth lives, which you guys see often in the populations that you serve. And then there's a language barrier when it comes to sex trafficking right now, talking about prostitution versus sex trafficking and what that looks like. And there's a video on our website, if you guys go to it under news and media in the top tab, which talks about like what is prostitution, and is prostitution a choice? And it's a great video. It's maybe 6 minutes long. I don't even think it's that long, just very detailing that prostitution is the choice of no choices. Meaning that typically if a woman or man were given an opportunity or a choice in which they weren't facing homelessness, they weren't facing debt or no job or a lot of these other vulnerabilities, then they wouldn't choose prostitution. And so it's not really a choice when it feels like it's the only option in order to keep your children fed or, have housing or any of that. And so reorienting our mindset as a society that we need to be extending hands up and being non-judgmental in the face of this, and understanding that we need to have services provided for these individuals that help them towards restoration. So we're going to talk about what it looks like to be on the road towards exploitation, and why so many people do fall into this, and what that grooming process looks like. And Sarah's going to help me through this with some examples that she's seen in her professional capacity and the people that she's worked with. So the first thing we know is that traffickers work to gain the trust of their victims. Again, this is also why a lot of traffickers are not only targeting vulnerable populations, but also youth. Just because it's easier. Traffickers gain the trust of their victims through a grooming process. They're manipulators through and through, and they quickly identify target-specific vulnerabilities, and they'll adjust their tactics to whatever that vulnerability is. So the first thing they do is they're going to select a target, and they're going to pick somebody that has a need. And then they're going to fill that need. It's usually a basic need. It's food, it's housing, it's clothing. Sometimes it's just acceptance or community. They'll gain their trust. They won't traffic immediately. They're going to fill that need consistently over a period of time and build a relationship and rapport. And then they'll slowly start to isolate their victim and pull them from friends or family or community things or activities. And then they'll begin the exploitation gradually. We only need to do this once. And then after that, they maintain their control. So if you have any examples.
So I do some teen trainings at one of the schools, and one of the videos that we show talks about, so this particular instance happened in Colorado, but it's one of those that across the board, this is kind of what we see. Teenager who met a guy at Starbucks. He said he was a college student. He wasn't, but there's that fraud piece. Said he was a college student. He was interning at this big firm over the summer. They were dating. There was this, like the wine and dine phase where it's, there's gifts, there's nice dinners out. There's questions. He's asking a lot of questions where, the victim might feel like, wow, I'm finally being seen. I'm finally being noticed. But really what he's doing is collecting that so that he knows how he can best manipulate her in the future. Anyways, fast forward, he pushes her to have sex with him. And then when they're done, they were hanging out with his cousins. Cousins are in the room when we're recording this. And then they all raped her. And so there's that forced piece. And then said, if you don't do this, then we're going to, show this video. And then once she started that, then there were beatings and things if she didn't do what she was supposed to be doing. So that's a Colorado example, but we see that kind of thing here as well. I've also had people that I've worked with who, like, their children have been used as the coercion piece. So you go do this, or I'm going to do this to your child. And so in order to protect their child, they are left with no other options. Yeah.
All right, so then our model in helping survivors not only leave exploitation, but find freedom from that lifestyle. And I think one of the things that is difficult to understand until you've been doing it for a long time is that coercion aspect that's happening, that has happened for years, sometimes within a victim or survivor's mind, is one of the most difficult things to overcome as they seek freedom in their own life. And so what Awaken does is we kind of come alongside survivors in the gaps in terms of not only services, but just community, since we know that survivors have spent a significant portion of their lives or their experience being isolated. That community aspect is really important to help them feel like they not only have a place to belong, they not only have a place to go, but that we're here even if they pop in and out. Because no survivor's journey is like this really straight linear, thing. The data shows that for domestic violence victims or people within trafficking, it sometimes takes up to 7 or more times to leave a situation, like permanently. And so Awaken understands that they have to be able to do that on their own. We're big on autonomy and independence and allowing them to just make that choice when it's right for them. And we're just always like, we're here, we're here, we're here. So we do that through this road to freedom. First is addressing that basic need. That is what the trafficker is trying to address. So if that can be addressed first and we can fill that gap immediately, that typically gives the survivor the chance, at the very least, to leave that situation and then explore what healing truly looks like. I would say that really there's no healing that can be done if our survivor is still with their trafficker. Would you say that's true?
Right. And there's also no healing that can be done when they're in survival mode. So like when they're still worried about, what they're going to eat, where they're going to stay, how they're going to stay warm, their brain isn't in the right mindset to be able to work on deeper things. So those basic needs do need to be met for multiple reasons.
So then there's this understanding that for a survivor to even begin talking about their story or exploring the things that have been done to them, there needs to be an element of trauma-informed therapy. So Awaken gives access to that. We partner with foundations, Health and Wholeness, and they do a great job working with our survivors. So then once they've reached a place in which they themselves have healed from certain things, they enter life skills training groups with us here at Awaken. And every participant is evaluated for that, whether or not they're appropriate for a group setting with where they're at in their healing journey. And life skills training can involve a whole gamut of things.
Yeah, so at the center, we do, my coworker and I work to, each month is a different theme, but there's some common themes throughout it all. Like we're always reinforcing healthy relationships. We're always reinforcing healthy boundaries, self-esteem, just some of those basic things that's going to help them that much more to hopefully see unhealth in relationships in the future. But yeah, sometimes it's as simple as like, it's a game day, because helping them to remember how to just have fun is important. Helping them to find joy, that's important. Sometimes it's more art-based, and because through that, like when someone's painting, I feel like then they can, I don't know, they let their guard down a little bit more. And then sometimes it is a little bit more direct psychoeducational, where it's like, today we are going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about, circle of trust, like who should be in your innermost circle of trust versus who doesn't deserve any of your, any of you or your information. Because sometimes that's a little bit blurry for survivors.
So then, after that, our goal is to come along survivors and help them become autonomous, become independent, become their own person, which includes workforce development. And so those are the 4 things that we address as we help our survivors kind of get out and get on their own. So Awaken's beginning, we have a lot of questions about this, because when you do go to our website, you see that we're based in Reno, Nevada, and then our second site is here in Green Bay. And a lot of people are like, why little old Green Bay? And there's a reason. But first, for Awaken as a whole, in 1971, prostitution became legal in Nevada. There's only 3 counties that have legalized prostitution, and they actually do not include Las Vegas or Reno. However, it's a great example of how the effects of legalized prostitution kind of seep everywhere, and they don't actually stay within the boundaries in which they're supposed to. And on top of that too, data has shown that the counties and the state now of Nevada as a whole, because it has legalized prostitution, is not safer for women and children. And has made it less safe. And with some of the participants that do work with Awaken in Reno, they've even said that back, during their trafficking days, the brothels were the worst place to be, and that their traffickers would actually send them to the brothels as punishment. And so it legalized sex is not.
Yeah, there's this idea that I think sometimes there's this idea that if we legalize it, then that will make it safer for the woman. But Reno has proved that that is not the case. They're still victims of trafficking. They're still, feeling desperate and left with no other options.
Yeah. So our co-founders in 2011, Jen and Melissa, founded Awaken. Awaken was founded because they just saw this gap in services for a restorative piece. And it's, again, that's the road that we just talked about, in which, yes, we can fill a basic need for a time. And yes, we can offer these things. But if you've been trafficked at the age of 14 and you're now 35 and you have children, and you've never had the ability to learn these life skills and to be in the workforce and all of that, there's just a gap in helping women achieve those goals and achieve that type of freedom, especially like financial freedom. So in 2022 then, Awaken's second site was opened in Green Bay by Regional Director Keisha Klaus. And the reason why is because she actually worked in the Reno one. She moved back here in Green Bay, just saw a need for this population. And so that's how Awaken was kind of born here in Green Bay. So yeah, we've been here for a little over a year now. We have served over 100 women and girls since our inception. Our youngest has been 11 and our oldest has been 69, and our median age is around 28. So our mission is to increase awareness and education surrounding the issue of commercial sexual exploitation and to provide healing and restoration for its victims. And our vision, we do it with 3 pillars, but our ultimate goal is to eradicate commercial sexual exploitation, and we want our victims and survivors to be restored to their fullest potential. And we want to be an inspirational model for other communities. So we do this through prevention, restoration, and city transformation. Prevention is talking, doing trainings, getting our neighbors to talk about it. Restoration is that piece that we talked about, the road to freedom, helping survivors gain that freedom. And then city transformation happens when we're all doing it together. And also our laws show what we believe, and our laws are protecting survivors. And, we're at a city and then a state level and a national level of making sure that we're doing
When
that.
the demand for buying goes down too.
That too. So we kind of talked about what we do. We stand shoulder to shoulder with survivors, giving them the tools they need to reclaim their lives, heal from past trauma, and build brighter futures. So at our center, we want to assist our participants with restorative care. So we are meeting those basic needs when we can, fostering relationships through life skills groups, and then our jail outreach. Making sure that we have a welcoming space for all of our participants, making sure our activities are client-centered, and that we also, a big part of what we do for life skills groups is that we provide a meal, and that we can kind of break bread together and kind of have this community mindset before we even begin some of our skills and all of that. So
yeah, so some of the things that we offer, like we've talked about, jail outreach, psychoeducational classes, access to individual therapy, drop-in center needs. So we do have a shower here that's accessible to our clients. We have a business center that has a computer and a printer. So if anybody needs to apply for a job or research something, print something off, that is accessible to them. That's one of those things too, where we walk alongside people. So we're always trying to give, most of them have been in a situation where their power has been taken away. And they've, sometimes almost have forgotten how to do things for themselves. And so some of that is like working with them to build that back up in them, the confidence in themselves that they can do it. And we always let them know anything that you can do, we're going to have you do it. Like if it's intimidating, to think about applying for food stamps or applying for a job, or you don't even know how to begin, how to research something or look into something, we'll be there with you. We're just not going to be the one to make that phone call. We're not going to be the one to fill that out, because we want to empower them so that they recognize that they can do it. case management emergency packs. So that's a one-time service for our clients that provides all the basic hygiene products that they could need, and one full outfit, including bra, underwear, socks. In the winter, we like to have winter boots if possible, for sure hand warmers for those who are outside more. And in the summer, flip-flops, just something that they can have on their feet. So that is, yeah, that's just something, one less worry that they have to have. We see that being utilized probably the most by our jail clients as soon as they're out. And we see this, sometimes where they're incarcerated in the summer and then they're being released in the winter. And they were incarcerated in flip-flops and shorts. They have no jacket, they have no shoes, they have no sweatshirts. So that's where it's like super important that we have the winter stuff for them, so that that they're not freezing the minute that they're getting out. Designated arranged transportation to groups and programming. So we understand that one of the hard parts with Green Bay versus Reno is Reno, there's a track. So there's a place where 4th Street is known for buying and selling sex. So because of that, Awaken Center is right off of 4th Street, so that it's super accessible, walkable distance from people who are still very much in the life. But it gives them the opportunity to just drop in and start to build those relationships and maybe start to see things a little bit differently. And then Awaken is there for them when they're ready to take that step out of the life. Green Bay is hard because everything is so spread out. And so, yeah, it's just, there's not really I think we're as close to a centrally located space as possible. But because of that, anybody who needs a ride within, 20-minute distance, usually, we'll give them a ride to and from groups, so that that's not a barrier for them to get to programming. And we also, will provide transportation to a programming thing, like from jail. So if we know when someone is being released, and let's say they got into a shelter somewhere, they got into treatment somewhere, we don't want the only reason why they don't make it there to be a barrier of transportation. So we will do our best to make sure that we will be there to pick them up and bring them there. We'll work together to make that happen. There's sometimes barriers of like not knowing exactly when they're going to be released, or not necessarily having an exact intake date or time. But we try to alleviate those as best as possible. We do have mentorship. So that's for clients who are a little bit more consistent and further along in their healing. And the mentorship just looks like a volunteer who's committed to a good chunk of their time per month, to be able to like really walk alongside these women in a more personal way than we're able to, just being their advocates and case managers. Access to basic needs. So again, the meals, showers, and emergency supplies. We have a warm line that's available 24/7, but it's not necessarily meant for crisis. So we let people know. We do refer them to the family services crisis line if it is a true crisis. And then it's meant more for, questions. If there's somebody who, just heard about us or got our number from a friend, they can call that anytime and we'll chat with them and just, try and set up an appointment with them. Or if there's an existing client that had something come up that can't wait until the next business day where they could actually talk to their advocate, then that's kind of what that is meant for. And then access to community resources. So we definitely do try and be knowledgeable of what is available in our community, so that we can make proper referrals to them. We try not to work in silos. We want to work with other organizations, because there's some really awesome resources in this area. And there's things that, we don't have expertise in, but other people do. So we utilize that as much as possible.
So from a community level, we'll do professional trainings, speaking engagements, tabling, and event resourcing. If you want a table at a local event, we'll set up a table and have resources available. Prevention and awareness gatherings, and then these community informationals. And we're going to be adding parents' nights this year. So we'll be able to get parents in and talk about very specifically for youth and teens, red flags, what to do, how to talk to your teen, and all of that. And so we'll be adding that. I think our first one's in April, and that is on our website. If you're interested in attending or having, somebody attend, you can look all that up under Wisconsin events on our website. So some local statistics. We're going to go through some national ones and some for Brown County. I do have some updated numbers that are not in this slide, so I will just share them with you once I get to that point. I just got them Monday. So from Polaris Project, as of 2021, the national trafficking trends, 16,554 trafficking victims were identified. This is through their national hotline. So these numbers are going to be a little bit skewed in the sense that this is a self-reported number. So someone has to call the hotline, they talk them through things and identify whether or not that individual is trafficked, and then it gets logged into this data. So being mindful of the fact that there are so many trafficking situations that we just do not know about happening and occurring in the nation and in the world. But of those 16,000, 10,359 were that's how many total trafficking situations happened. So that could mean that some of those survivors and victims were all within one trafficking situation. And then of that 10,000, 7,898 had a component of sex trafficking. So some of those were just labor. Some of them were labor and sex trafficking. In 2020, Polaris Project identified an increase of 22% in online recruitment. There was a 125% increase on Facebook and a 95% increase on Instagram. So what we're learning is that with technology, traffickers don't need to be face-to-face anymore. They can just recruit directly online from a room anywhere in the world, which is terrifying.
Well, and perpetrators are where their victims are. So, or potential victims are. So, teens aren't necessarily hanging out at the mall and parks like they used to. Now they're online, and traffickers and other perpetrators know that. And it's a lot easier to gain that trust online too when you can pose as potentially someone different than what you are. Your picture doesn't need to look like you. And there's a lot of teens that take that at face value. They see that picture, oh, this kid, this looks like a kid my age.
Yeah, that fraud element of force, fraud, and coercion is easier than ever with the introduction of, all these like Snapchat and things like that. So of 4,000 victims whose recruitment was known, meaning they were able to identify it, 52% were brought into trafficking by a member of their own families or an intimate partner. It's a really high number. Typically, we're seeing of that, I think the number the previous year was 42%. So that number has increased in the last year. And then the age of entry into exploitation, 11% were adults, 28% were minors, and then 61% were of an unknown age. So that means while these victims were kind of self-reporting and talking about their situation, they didn't remember or didn't know, which really makes you wonder, were they even adults then if they don't remember?
I was just going to say with familial trafficking too, unfortunately, that's not a new concept. I think it's new for awareness. It didn't have that name, but we work with women who, were trafficked by their grandmothers 40 years ago. And so unfortunately that is something that has been around, but I think there's definitely been that growth.
Yeah. So for Brown County, as of June of this last year, there were 225 known traffickers or pimps, 384 known victims, 298 identified vulnerable or at-risk minors. They were all female. And 130 identified locations in which sex trafficking is taking place and occurring. These numbers have changed in some ways. Right now, when I got on Monday, I literally got this email. The known victims is 401 now. The subjects of high risk is 315. And now there's 113 suspected networks or rings, trafficking rings right here in Brown County, Green Bay area. And 134 locations. So those are the updated numbers as it pertains to like right now. And that's since 2017. That's when they started tracking, was in 2017. So in 2022, then the Green Bay City Police Department saw 28 cases involving human trafficking. That's more than two a month. That's a lot for our small town. 17 cases involving prostitution. 7 of those cases were related to juveniles. 5 arrests or citations were linked to trafficking or prostitution, and then there was 1 referral to the DA for human trafficking. So the Wisconsin Department of Justice has stated that trafficking statistics for Wisconsin are vastly underreported and underrepresented. There's lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of data collection, even just the systems to do that. I mean, we're behind as a state at the state level to even be able to track those things. And so what that really means is that as a state, we just don't really know. We don't know what the trafficking situation looks like. We have coalitions, we have people that are involved and aware, and we're pushing our numbers together, but at a state like just level in which we could just release a report saying this is it, you know, we don't really know. So here's some red flags, and we separated these into 2 groups because we need to understand that there's the vulnerable and people who are at risk, and then there's the ones that are already being exploited. One is preventative and one is understanding this is already occurring, and there's 2 different tracks for how we help or engage those things. So on the left side, the red flags for at risk for trafficking. This is the list. And so you can talk about this even just with your own kids, with your neighbors, you know, with your community members. This is what we want from a preventative side, to be able to have our community know so that we can step in before somebody is trafficked, because it is really, really difficult to help somebody once they are already being trafficked. So significant increase in time spent online. Someone who was previously outgoing is suddenly withdrawn and isolated from friends and family, sudden depression or acting distracted, spending more and more time with someone that family and friends don't know, someone that kind of just popped up out of the blue, and now they're you know, you've never met them and you don't know them. Dating someone that friends or family have never met, or is this individual's like from out of town or out of state. For youth or teens, falling asleep in class, slipping grades, attention or focus issues, quitting activities that were once enjoyed, especially sports and extracurriculars and stuff like that. Sudden sexual behavior that's uncharacteristic, and then any sudden substance abuse or use. So those are what to look for people that are could even be identified. And of course, we didn't even talk about vulnerable populations, but that's already the number one: people who are missing basic needs, who are unhoused, all of that certainly are bullseyes for traffickers. They're looking for those vulnerabilities because, again, they want to fill a need and exploit that need. For people who are probably already being exploited or trafficked, on the right side, we're going to look for branding or tattoos, sexually provocative clothing inappropriate for weather or situation. Right now, it's the easiest to see because it's cold outside and snowing. And so it's a little harder in the warmer months to really identify that one. Unable to make decisions without approval, unexplained injuries, a claim of an older boyfriend or girlfriend, hotel keys, rolls of cash, multiple phones, and refillable gift cards. Doesn't hold their own ID and isn't separated from their caretaker. This is a big one I talk about. We talk about it a lot with like healthcare providers and even with local bar owners or people like that. When somebody is like glued, especially to a younger person's side. So if it's a much older adult with a much younger individual and doesn't leave them, can't go to the bathroom alone, doesn't have their own ID, can't pay for their own drinks, constantly looking to this individual, even from just like engaging around them, not allowed to talk to anyone. Those are some big red flags for someone that's being trafficked. Away from a trafficker, if there's someone that just has a lot of unexplained money or an uncharacteristic display of like expensive clothes and accessories and shoes and electronics and things like that, we see that a lot. And then also for young women or even young men, significantly older companions. We deal primarily with women and girls. We refer out for males. It's absolutely happening for males, but for females, if they're surrounded kind of by a posse of much older women, and again, there's this element where they're not really on their own, that's definitely a red flag. Anything to add on that? No. So via Shared Hope International, every year they release a report card for every state on kind of their state statutes and how well they support survivors and victims of sex trafficking. And Wisconsin, again, got an F this year. If you're curious about why, you guys can go to their website and kind of click around and see how they grade that. But basically for identification of and response to victims, which is one of the biggest ones we look at, we scored an F in that area. Same for prevention and training. And so that's something that Awaken would like to see changed, in the next few years, certainly. So just talking about getting involved, what we can all do. We have volunteer teams, meals and events and awareness and maintenance and all of that. And we have lots of volunteers that are plugged in at a community level doing that, which is great. Because of the types of situations we have here, our volunteers don't plug in directly with clients or participants. They are at a different level in which they can provide things, again, like meals for our life skills groups, and they drop that off and then we're able to enjoy that. So from a volunteering standpoint, it's a little different than a lot of other nonprofits because they're not like directly involved with client services. The closest they get to that is through our mentorship program, which will be starting a lot. We'll be picking up pace this year with, but that requires a lot of training. I mean, a year-long commitment, and then you're paired with a participant here. So our other ways then are through community outreach. Again, you can host an informational or parents' night. We can come talk to people, talking to your own neighbors about the realities of trafficking, and then talking to the teens in your life about red flags. When in doubt, call non-emergency lines for things that aren't emergent. Here's 2 numbers that you can call just to report something. If you see something that just seems off, especially when it comes to someone, if it's a red flag on being exploited or trafficked, we say don't engage. There's not much you can do on that level anyway, but definitely report it, get a description, get a vehicle, get a license plate number, and report all of that and report what you've seen to our police departments. There. So yeah, if you are interested in volunteering, we have an onboarding training that you can definitely attend. But other than that, again, it's just more prevention. So doing trainings, talking to people, and just raising awareness is a huge part.
I think there's a lot of people that are always, I think some of it right now is just talking about the fact that it happens. Whether that's like you may not have kids, but your friend has teenage kids. And so just letting them know, like, hey, are you making sure to have conversations with them about online safety? Because recruiting happens online. There are perpetrators out there that will jump on any sort of vulnerability they see it. There's this, I think, feeling that if a kid comes from a good family, right, they're going to be protected from this, but that's not true. There's plenty of traffickers who will only traffic their victims between school and dinner time. So parents don't even realize what's going on. They're not missing a day at school. They're making their grades. They're home, by dinner or bedtime. But in that gap in between. But anyways, yeah, just I think talking about it because there's so many people who are shocked that it happens here. Because again, in Green Bay, it is fairly hidden. It's not in your face. So again, we talked about in Reno, they have a track. So people see it. They see what's going on. They're not surprised to know what's happening. Here people are, because it's online setups and it's motel dates and things like that. So yeah, it's just not as obvious.
Yeah. So we can go into questions if there are any. I think there might be some in the chat. Let me check. But yeah, if you guys just want to jump in.
There was a question in the chat about whether or not you guys are engaging directly with middle school or high school students.
So we are doing trainings at this point, and we will take referrals as they come, but we're not necessarily advertising for that yet because we are hoping to hire a program director who will be able to build a program that really does these youth justice, so that when that we would have services like really ready to go for them. But we will do one-on-one, case by case.
Yeah. That's our goal in the next couple of years, is to hire for youth advocacy and then to do prevention trainings for that specific population. We already do that in Reno. We use a curriculum in the school systems there. And so implementation of that is definitely part of our long-term goal.
Right, and then there are two more questions. Do you serve women who haven't been trafficked at your drop-in location, and how prominent is religion in your services?
All right, you take the first one.
So they do have to have some sort of commercial sexual exploitation. So that can even look like survival sex, where, you know, they that whole sex in exchange of something for value. So whether that was they're an addict and they needed a high, and so they resorted to having sex in order to maintain drugs, or they had sex in order to have a place to sleep for the night. So, but there does have to be some sort of commercial sexual exploitation component.
Yeah. So as far as our mission and vision, in which we state that we're faith-based, that is definitely not a part of our programming. So we don't utilize any religious affiliation within our programming. It's definitely an internal structure from our founders and for our staff. Not every staff member is religious. And it's not a part, unless women express that they would like that to be a part of, you know, whatever they are doing with advocates, then that's more than welcomed, at whatever that might look like.
Yeah, in the jail, I always wait for people to open that door. So if they talk about going to a Bible study with the chaplain in jail, or about doing a Bible study with the ladies in the pod, I'll ask more about that. And if that, because for people who faith is a big component in their life, that's an important part of healing for them. And so we're definitely more than open to talk about that with them. But it is definitely not forced on anyone. So again, I just wait for that door to be opened. And if they bring it up, then I'll ask. But
And what are the credentials of your staff? Are they licensed social workers, counselors, etc.?
No, we have a BSW, and then I actually got my bachelor's in legal studies and criminal justice, planning to be a police officer. Long story short, that didn't work, but my husband was in the military, so we moved too much for that to work. But I did work with recovering addicts in Baltimore for a few years, and that's when I kind of fell in love with the social services. So then I did you know, domestic violence hotlines. I volunteered with family services doing call outs and stuff after hours. So yeah.
Yeah. Keisha, our executive director, she's a legal consultant. She's an attorney. And she's been working with this population for 7 or 8 years now, from the legal side. Right now, we're in the process of hiring a program director that will fit a lot of that other criteria that we don't have as an internal staff right now. But our Reno team does have licensed therapists on staff. And so between our Reno team and checking in with them, and they work with staff directly. We actually have a licensed therapist on staff just for staff to utilize. They also go every Monday to foundations to work with their therapists there to make sure that they're trauma informed in all of their situations and all of their classes and all of that.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're not pushing the line of pretending to be therapists without the credentials of that. So we always, a lot of what we're talking about is like, hey, we need to have this difficult conversation. What are your thoughts on that, about how to go about that? Make sure, again, like she said, that we're doing it in a trauma-informed way. But then also just making sure that the things that we're working with them on and talking to them about aren't dancing that line of being therapeutic in nature, because we don't have those credentials.
So that's when we refer out to foundations for specific participants when they do need therapy and they need therapy practices, then they go to the foundations typically and work with a therapist there.
Okay, the questions are blowing up. You got a ton. So are the women who you go and see in jail, are they in jail for prostitution charges, or are these things that were raised when they're there on other charges?
Yeah, I've actually only had one referral from there that has been there for prostitution. Most of the other ladies that are there for retail theft, drugs of some kind, whether that's, you know, intent to sell or just possession. Disorderly, bail jumping. There's a lot of other things that these ladies do get wrapped up in. Sometimes we see with like the drug piece, sometimes that is their entry into commercial sexual exploitation, like they were addicted before, and then that was what led to, or what they had to resort to because of lack of funds. Sometimes we see that that's they got addicted to drugs as a means of, you know, their trafficker controlling them. And then sometimes they were sober when they got into the life, but then they started to use to cope with what was going on. So we see it from a lot of different avenues, but a lot of our ladies do have some sort of addiction in their past or present. But yeah, and then there's things traffickers will get them to do other, and I'm not saying everybody who is at the jail with trafficking in their past has these other crimes directly because of their trafficker, but sometimes they do, because traffickers will sometimes use these ladies to run drugs or to steal things from the store, because they know that they've got that that they have that control over the victim, and then the victim is going to take the heat for it, not them, if they get caught. So,
And I mean, I would probably add that the trauma caused by experiencing trafficking could also lead to a lot of the other situations that they're in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it appears you're working with the Green Bay Police Department. Are you open to reaching out to and providing information about your resources to other local law enforcement agencies?
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's a Keisha question. So I will ship that one over to her.
Yeah, and I would say if anyone on law enforcement is here, if you'd like to put your information in the chat, we'll make sure that Carly or Sarah or someone from Awaken reaches out.
that'd be awesome.
Okay. Do you ever link up with other organizations that have the same common goal? For example, Bikers Against Trafficking.
So Bikers Against Trafficking isn't one that we've worked with directly as of yet. We're certainly always open to it. Some of it is just managing our time. You know, it's like trying to do the client services while also being proactive about reaching out to other organizations. So but definitely partnering with other people who have similar passions is important to us.
Yeah, I'm the contact for that. So again, if you want to drop everything in the chat, if you want just to have a chat about what could be a possibility for our organizations, I mean, I'm happy to meet with anyone and everyone about that.
Awesome. Okay, if you're working with an individual that's on supervision, do you communicate with their probation or parole agent?
Only if we have an ROI, a release of information. So that is something that we explain to our clients too, that we can put parameters around our releases. So like, you know, just having it be where like, if your probation officer calls and wants to know if you've been coming to group and confirm that, we can confirm that, but we won't talk about other things. Or if all of a sudden you stop showing up to group, you know, can we just call and see if you've been checking in with them? So we can put very specific parameters on. We definitely love to collaborate with probation, but again, that's the client's choice whether or not we get to talk to them. So
yeah, we do collaborate from a referral standpoint too
For
with PO office. We get a lot of referrals from them and they've been amazing.
Okay, awesome. How do you offer safe housing for clients? Do you have connections to a shelter in the area?
Yeah, so that's probably, if I'm being honest, my least favorite part of my job, because it's such a hard, like, housing, and I think every nonprofit in the area feels it. You know, it's like, it's just, there's just not enough of it. There's, you know, different barriers to it and things. But yes, we do work closely with transitional housing and different shelters in the area. try and know, you know, which ones have what criteria to make sure that we're sending them to the right place. And then that's something too, if they need to fill out applications while they're in the jail, I will always try and either do that with them, or if it's an online application, there's somebody within the jail that I work with that would be able to do the online piece that I can't do with them. But yes.
Okay, and what does your referral process look like? If there may be a guest looking to get connected with your services or possible trafficking is suspected.
So we do have a one-page referral form for community partners. That's how we appreciate having it done, where they can just, if let's say that they're a Wellspring or something, it comes up in conversation. If Wellspring had that sheet, they can give it to them, have them fill it out, and just scan it in and email it to us. And then we make that connection, or attempt to make that connection. Sometimes it's tricky. In the jail, it's usually through jail outreach. And a lot of times how people hear about us is, you know, ladies talk in there. So they find out about this service, and then they reach out to jail outreach, who contacts us. And then sometimes it is self-referral. So a lot of our helpline calls are, you know, we found this number on a website, or excuse me, we got this number from somebody who already works with you. And so we don't need to have necessarily a formal referral to start working with somebody.
If you do want the referral sheet for your own use, you can just email us and I will send that over. It's a sheet that you can just keep on your end and just keep filling out as often as you need, and then you just email it back to us, and then that's how the connection's made.
Okay, wonderful. So that's all the questions. But oh wait. Similar to DV, does it take the men and women you work with multiple times to leave or to plan to leave? Does age make a difference, or gender?
All the things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Trafficking is one of those things, you know, I've learned with through working with survivors, that you just have to be patient. You can't push on them your goals for them. You really have to be willing to meet them where they're at. You really have to be willing to understand that there are going to likely be setbacks at certain points along the way for different reasons. And it's just such a complex, deep issue. Healing takes a long time. And so, yeah, there's definitely times where it's like, it's hard because you can see where they could go, right? You can see their potential. And, you know, you want to just tell them, like, you're worth so much more than that, but you have to be willing, you know, to just be there for them as they're ready, and walk them through the setbacks, and help them to know that, you know, you're there no matter what.
Two, a really important thing to remember is that many people do not even realize they're being trafficked. A lot of survivors, their journey to even the knowledge of their trafficking experience is more than half the process. And so if they get connected with services, or if, you know, they start talking to somebody in the jail or wherever, and they start to understand that their situation was that they were trafficked, and it wasn't just like, well, I just made really bad choices, or actually I just, you know, shouldn't have gotten this boyfriend, or
a lot of times they can recognize, like, that wasn't a healthy relationship, but they still see it as just that, an unhealthy relationship. They don't necessarily see themselves as victims of trafficking.
So that adds to the fog, the brain fog of even leaving a situation.
Okay, we only have about 5 minutes left, but I do have one thing that I'd love for you guys to talk about. Could you talk about the work that is going on in the community surrounding the 2025 draft?
Yes. Oh no, this is a Keisha question too.
It's been her baby. yes.
So from a very
You can just
broad-
like do like a high level.
yeah, broad overview. We know that the draft is coming. We understand that the population that is going to be present for that means that there's going to be a higher risk for trafficking, for prostitution, for the buying of sex. And so getting our ducks in a row in terms of having almost like a task force present for that. We're in the planning process of what that even looks like at a community level and beyond. So honestly, we're welcome to suggestions to people, agencies, and community members and partners that want to partner towards that goal of keeping our city safe for that draft. What you can offer, the things, the barriers that we're going to be looking for, just off the top of my head, is like transportation. So if a trafficking victim is identified during this week-long process, but they're from out of state or they're from this county, how do we get them home, or how do we get them to a program? We're going to need safe rides and things like that available for people to get them somewhere. We're going to need probably, call lines and things like that for people to report who takes those calls, who gets sent out, all of that kind of stuff. And so from a community level, it's a very big thing that has to happen. And so, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming today and for presenting to all of us. I think there are about 50 people here in the Zoom with us. So thank you to everyone who came. And just a quick reminder, January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and tomorrow is Wear Blue Day. So if you remember, please wear blue tomorrow and post on social media to help bring awareness to the issue. I think, one of the things in a place, especially like Green Bay, is that the biggest issue with trafficking is that people don't believe it happens here.
Yes.
And so it's not getting enough attention, and people who are surviving trafficking aren't necessarily able to access resources because they don't know they exist.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a really great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.